CEO mocked my accent at work. My comeback left him completely speechless. Welcome back with a new, real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. AT the end, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone. I still remember that morning like it was yesterday. The way the air felt calm, ordinary but with something under the surface I couldn't name yet. My alarm had gone off early, and I'd gotten ready without much thought. Breakfast was quick coffee and a slice of toast just like every other day. I told myself it was going to be just another meeting, another day in the routine of my life. But I was wrong. I work hard, every day. I've always believed in proving myself quietly, without drawing too much attention. I'm the kind of person who believes respect is earned, and I thought my work would speak for itself. Before that day, life was a steady rhythm wake-up. Work, sleep, repeat. There wasn't drama. There wasn't hostility, just a steady path forward. But that morning, everything shifted without warning. Walking into the building, I felt the usual buzz of the office, the hum of computers, the low murmur of conversations, the faint scent of coffee in the air. But today, there was something different. People glanced at me in a way that felt strange. A few exchanged quick whispers before looking away. I brushed it off, thinking it was just nerves before a big meeting. The meeting was with the CEO, a man who carries himself with authority, with that rare kind of confidence that can be both inspiring and intimidating. I had been to meetings with him before. They were never this tense. When I stepped into the boardroom, I noticed the silence. Not the polite silence of a room ready to start, but something heavier, like a weight pressing in from all sides. My footsteps felt louder than they should have. I took my seat, trying to focus on my notes, but the air felt thick, almost electric. I didn't know yet that this moment would change everything about the way I saw myself and the world around me. It started small. A slight smirk from him, a passing remark directed at another colleague. I tried to ignore it, but then, suddenly, it came. A mocking imitation of my accent. Clear, sharp, deliberate. The sound cut through the air like glass breaking. My heart froze for a moment. My breath caught. I felt my skin flush. It wasn't just the words, it was the intent behind them. The laughter that followed was cruel, almost predatory, and it felt like the room tilted under me. I looked around, some faces hid behind awkward smiles, some avoided eye contact, and some stared openly, surprised. I could feel every second stretching out like a lifetime. I sat there quietly at first, as if waiting for it to be a mistake, but I knew it wasn't. That moment was an act, calculated, meant to put me in my place. And the truth is, it wasn't the first time something like this had happened to me. But it was the first time it had happened so openly, in front of everyone. Inside, I felt something shift. My instincts screamed to stay quiet, to leave without causing trouble. But a voice inside me said something different, something fierce. That voice told me I couldn't let it pass this time. Not when respect, my dignity was on the line. Not when my voice itself was under attack. I remember gripping the edge of the table, my fingers pressing into the wood until it hurt. My heart pounded harder with every passing second. I could feel everyone watching me now, waiting to see what I would do, and I knew this was the moment I had to decide. To speak or to silence myself forever. I took a breath, and I spoke. But what happened after that? It wasn't just a conversation, it became a battle. When I spoke, the air seemed to shift instantly. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steady, deliberate. I didn't raise it, I didn't need to. The weight behind my words made them heavy enough. I told him that mocking my accent wasn't a joke, that it was disrespect, that it wasn't just about me, it was about every person who's ever been made to feel less because of where they came from, how they sounded, or the way they spoke. For a moment, there was silence. A silence so complete it felt like the sound had been swallowed whole. I could hear my own breathing, the faint hum of the air conditioner, my heart beating like a drum. I dared to look around the room, and I saw expressions shift, some startled, some uncomfortable, others quietly nodding in agreement. But the CEO? His expression hardened. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms like he was weighing whether to reply. Then he chuckled, not softly, not kindly, but in that way people do when they want to belittle someone without saying it outright. "Oh, come on," he said. "It's just a little fun. Don't take it so seriously." That moment felt like a test. I knew exactly what was coming. The room seemed to lean in. My colleagues were silent. No one stepped in. And inside, a storm began to rise in me: anger, shame, disbelief, pride, all tangled together. I realized this wasn't just about him mocking me. This was about him thinking he could get away with it, thinking no one would call him out. And I couldn't let that stand. I responded calmly, but with a steel edge I could feel in my chest. I explained that what he called fun was humiliation. That jokes like that are part of a much larger problem. The subtle, everyday prejudice that gets dismissed as harmless banter. I spoke about dignity, about respect, about the courage it takes to stand up for yourself when the world whispers for you to stay quiet. He shifted in his chair, and the air became heavier. My words seemed to land differently now. The laughter had faded completely, but instead of an apology, there was a challenge in his eyes. He looked at me like I'd crossed a line. Then came the moments after the whispers, the sideways glances, the people avoiding my eyes. I could feel the tension build, like a storm gathering strength. And deep inside me, I knew something was breaking. Not just for me, but for everyone in that room. Because what happened next wasn't just about an insult. It was about power, and I was no longer willing to let it go. After I spoke up, something changed in the air of that room. It wasn't loud or sudden, it was subtle. Like a slow shift in the tide, but it was there. People stopped talking. Chairs scraped softly against the floor. The hum of the air conditioning seemed louder now, sharper. It was as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I stayed in my seat, my hands resting lightly on the table, but my body was tense. My mind was racing. I had expected some kind of pushback, but I hadn't expected it to feel so intense, so personal. His eyes stayed fixed on me, and I could feel them burning. It wasn't just disagreement, it was an unspoken challenge, a silent battle. The meeting dragged on after that moment, but nothing was the same. Every word he spoke carried an edge I hadn't heard before. Every glance he gave me was sharp, calculated. I could feel the weight of the room shifting against me. Colleagues avoided meeting my eyes. A few glanced at me quickly, almost apologetically, but no one said anything. Later, I learned that whispers about me had already started circulating. She made him look bad, some said. She crossed a line, others murmured. I knew that standing up would make waves, but I hadn't realized just how far-reaching they would be. It wasn't just about the meeting anymore, it was about reputation, about power, about control. Over the next days, things grew harder. I noticed the subtle changes: emails that went unanswered, invitations to meetings that no longer came, casual greetings that turned cold. Even my projects began to be sidelined. It was clear, speaking out had consequences. But strangely, I didn't feel regret. I felt resolve. At night, I'd lie awake replaying that moment in the boardroom. My heart would race, my thoughts tangled in a mix of doubt and defiance. I kept asking myself, had I spoken up too much? Had I pushed too hard? But every time I asked, the answer came back stronger. No, I had done what I had to do. I had refused to be silent. Then one afternoon, something happened that changed everything. I was walking down the hallway when someone stopped me. It was one of my colleagues, quiet, usually reserved. She hesitated, glancing around before speaking. "Alec, I just wanted to say, I saw what you did. I'm sorry it happened to you." Her words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just empathy, it was recognition. And recognition felt like a spark. Others began to step forward, quietly at first, But then more openly, stories began to surface, stories of moments they had kept silent about, moments where they had also felt belittled or disrespected. The tension in the office became undeniable. It was no longer just my story. It was everyone's. And I began to realize that the fight was no longer just about that meeting. It was about something much bigger, something systemic, something that could change everything. And I knew whatever came next, it wouldn't be easy. It all came to a head one morning I'll never forget. The office was buzzing with an uneasy energy. People whispering quietly in corners, exchanging looks that seemed heavy with things left unsaid. I could feel it before I even walked into the building. Something was coming, and I had no idea what it would look like. That day, I was called into a meeting. Not the usual meeting, this one felt different. The kind of meeting where you know every eye will be on you. As I stepped into the conference room, I noticed him, the CEO, sitting at the head of the table. His expression was unreadable, but there was a certain sharpness in his eyes that made my chest tighten. The room was full. Colleagues I barely spoke to were there. Some with curious glances, others with faces that betrayed anticipation, or even worry. No one spoke as I sat down. The air felt heavy, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Then he spoke. His voice low, controlled, but cutting through the silence like a blade. "Alec," he said, "we need to talk about what happened." My heart slammed in my chest. I could feel my palms getting sweaty. My mind raced, trying to anticipate what this could mean. Would it be an apology, a dismissal, a confrontation? But the tone in his voice didn't sound like an apology. It sounded like a trial. He leaned forward. His words hit me like blows. "You've created disruption in this office. You've challenged authority. And for what? Because of an accent?" His voice rose slightly. "Do you realize the chaos this has caused?" I swallowed hard. My mind screamed at me to stay calm, but inside, my pulse was pounding. I looked around the table. There were nods from some, uncomfortable silence from others. No one was defending me. It felt as though the entire room had turned into a courtroom, and I was the defendant. I took a deep breath. I knew this was my moment. Not to back down, not to be silenced. "Yes," I said, my voice clear, strong. "I challenged you because it was wrong. Because respect matters. Because the way we treat each other defines who we are. Not just as a company, but as people. If my speaking up causes chaos, maybe it's time for the chaos to change something." The room went still. My words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I could see him tighten his jaw, like I'd struck him in a place he couldn't reach. There was no laughter, no smirk, just silence. Then, without warning, the CEO stood. He didn't say another word. He just turned and walked out. The sound of the door closing echoed in my chest like a drumbeat I couldn't shake. The silence lingered long after, and in that moment, I knew something had shifted. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every voice that had ever been silenced, every story left untold. And deep down, I knew I had just stepped into the fight of my life. After he walked out, the silence in the room felt heavier than ever. My chest was tight, my hands trembling slightly. I stayed seated for a long moment, listening to the faint hum of the air conditioning and the soft shuffle of papers somewhere across the table. No one spoke. No one moved. Eventually, I stood. My legs felt like lead, but I walked out of the meeting with my head held high. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to leave that room. Outside, the hallway was quieter than usual. I could hear muffled voices from other offices, the faint click of shoes on polished floors. My heart was still pounding. I didn't feel victorious. I felt raw. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment. The events of the day played in my head like a relentless film. Every detail, every glance, every word replayed again and again. I thought about the whispers, the cold stares, the way people had stopped including me in conversations. But I also thought about the colleague who had quietly told me she saw what happened, and the others who had started to speak up afterward. That thought gave me strength. The next days were not easy. There were more meetings, some tense, some silent. Some colleagues avoided me altogether. Others approached me quietly with nods or sympathetic smiles. But something had changed. I felt it deep inside me. The fear that had once held me back was slowly being replaced by something stronger: determination. I began to see my story as more than just my own. It became a part of something much larger, a conversation about respect, equality, and justice. I began sharing my experience, quietly at first, then more openly. People began listening, they began to speak, and it became clear that I wasn't just standing up for myself, I was standing up for everyone who had ever been dismissed, ridiculed, or silenced. Looking back now, I understand that moment in the boardroom was more than a confrontation. It was a choice to speak, even when my voice trembled, a choice to stand even when the ground seemed uncertain. That choice changed everything, not just for me, but for those who saw it happen. I don't know what comes next, but I do know this: silence is easy. Courage is hard. And if we all choose courage, maybe the world will finally begin to change. So I ask you, what would you choose?